Hello, my name is Joanne from 123stitch.com. Today I'm going to show you how to finish a cross stitch or embroidery design using a pillow form. We'll do an envelope finish, which is this nice little overlapping flap of fabric on the back that allows you to tuck your pillow form inside. It's a relatively quick and easy finish requiring just a few supplies, and I can't wait to show you how to do it. Before we get started though, please go down below, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. If you're not, click on that subscribe button now so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Also, the supplies I mentioned today are going to be listed as a link in the description. So what do we need? We need our stitched piece. Here's mine. We need some backing fabric for the back of our pillow. We might want some coordinating fabric to go on the pillow itself. Depending on the size of the pillow, you might want to add some fabric to the bottom, to the sides, or all the way around. I'm going to be using this one. Optionally, you might want some fusible interfacing to make your fabric a little thicker. You'll need something to cut the fabric with, whether that's a ruler and scissors or you use a rotary cutter and mat. Either work. A tape measure will be helpful. A fabric marking pen to mark our fabric so we can cut it out. And then along with our sewing machine, some clips or pins to hold our fabrics in place. You might want some trim for your design. That's optional as well. And then of course you need your pillow forms. There's all kinds of different sizes and shapes. Here's two that I happen to have handy. These are a little bit smaller, but you can also do the same technique on larger pillows like a 12-inch by 12-inch or 14 by 14-inch. The same technique will work for any size. That's all the supplies we need, so let's go ahead and get started on our pillow. Okay, here's the piece we're going to turn into a pillow. This is I Would Rather Be Stitching by Primrose Cottage Stitches, and I did it on a 28 count white Lugana. Because it's such a thin fabric, I did go ahead and put interfacing on the back. I just did a rough trim on this. I just made sure it was big enough for my pillow, but not to exact size, and then I put the interfacing on. Anytime you do interfacing, make sure your piece is clean and straight. You can pull the opposite corners before you attach the interfacing. That just gives it a little bit more bulk. I also went ahead and did that with my backing fabric and coordinating fabric. They're very thin cotton. I just wanted to make it a little more substantial. The pillow I'm going to use is a 7.5 inch by 10.5 inch pillow by Pine Mountain Designs. You can go by what the manufacturer says the pillow size is, or to be more precise, go ahead and measure it yourself. And that is just seam to seam to give you the exact size. Mine is 7.5 inches by 10.5 inches. So we're going to write that down so we remember what size we're working with. I made sure that it was the stitch piece is big enough to cover the pillow. But when I did that, I saw all this white and it's just a little bit too much white. So I wanted to add a coordinating fabric. So I have this honeycomb fabric that I think is going to be perfect to add to the bottom. There's not enough to add to the sides, so just to the bottom. Now you can see I added some rickrack to the top here. When this is attached to the top piece, it'll look like that, which I like a lot. I think it breaks up that seam. I did that on this pillow as well. So the way to sew this rickrack on is quite simple, and I did just do a video on it, which I will link to down below. But basically, I just lined the rickrack up with the straightened top edge of my fabric, and then just sewed a line of stitching right down the middle. Makes it quite easy to attach, and it's kind of a nice little finish. So what we have to decide first is how much fabric do we want showing on the bottom. We're not going to worry about the top or the sides right now, just right here. So keeping in mind that our little rickrack is going to be pointing up, I can kind of get an idea of where I want it to be. It doesn't have to be the same as the top, just whatever makes you happy. And keep in mind that you need to add some room for the seam allowance. So I think what I'm going to do is 3/4 of an inch. So for me, that will be 1/2 inch to the edge and then that 1/4 inch to my already stitched line. If you're not doing rickrack, then you're just going to measure however far down you want here and draw a line across your fabric, allowing for that seam allowance. So say you want 1/2 inch of fabric showing, draw your line here 3/4 inch, your 1/2 inch space and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're not adding extra fabric to the bottom, just ignore this whole part and wait till we get to the next part. So first thing I'm going to do is measure. I'm going to use my ruler here and my fabric marking pen. This one is heat erasable. It's not going to show, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a cutting line. And I'm going to line my ruler up with the bottom of my stitching. That makes sure it's straight. And I'm doing that on the 3/4 inch line. And I'm going to draw a line all the way across. And that will be my cutting line. Go ahead and just cut that out with my scissors. Again, we're not paying attention to the top or the sides right now. Let's get that out of the way. Okay. Go. And then I'm going to take my piece here that I already have the rickrack on, and I'm going to put right sides together, line up the seams, and either clip or clip or pin in place. And if you don't have rickrack, you're just going to go to your sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down here. If you left a larger seam allowance, that's fine. Allow for that. Do your 1/2 inch seam, whatever amount you allowed for seam. I like to do just a 1/4 inch. I don't think any more is necessary. Now, for me, I don't know if you could see it, but there's already a stitch line on here from when I attached the rickrack. So I don't have to measure a 1/4 inch. I'm just going to follow my stitch line. That will ensure that my rickrack is even and points up straight when I finish. So I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to sew right along my stitch line all the way across. If you don't have a stitch line from rickrack, then you're just going to do a 1/4 inch or whatever you decided to do for your seam allowance all the way across. And we'll do that and be right back. Okay, my bottom fabric is now sewn to the top. You can see that nice row of rickrack in there. I did press the seam towards the backing fabric and not towards the cross stitch. And now the next thing we need to decide is where to cut the top and the sides, but I'm going to deal with the top first. So I'm going to lay it on my pillow and kind of get an idea of how much fabric I want showing on the top, keeping in mind that it rounds over a little bit. And then I want to make sure there's enough of my pretty backing fabric showing, not just a strip. So let's see, with my tape measure, that's approximately an inch, maybe 3/4. Let me try that again. Yeah, 3/4 of an inch. So what I need to do is, again, draw a straight line across here at 3/4 of an inch. And I need to line up my quilting ruler here, which I love using for this purpose, with the top row of stitching all the way across. It's on the 3/4 inch line. Take my marking pen and draw my cutting line. All right, I'm going to cut that out. Okay, now we know that we need this to be 7.5 inches because our pillow measures 7.5 inches. So I'm going to measure top to bottom 7.5 inches. I need a wider ruler. Let's just do some lines here and then we can go ahead and go back and fill in the line. 7.5 inches. Make sure that's straight. Just do that all the way across here. Okay, and that's our bottom cutting line. Go ahead and cut that. And then that's all that's left is the sides. Let's make sure this looks good. There we go. It's going to be perfect. Now we need to do the sides, and it was 10.5 inches across. So we need to figure out 10.5 inches. I like to just take my tape measure and see where 10.5 inches falls. And in this case, it falls at, it centers perfectly. If I do an inch on each side, that will give me 10.5 inches. So I'm going to draw a line 1 inch on each side. Again, going by the last row of stitching, making sure that's what I want, 1 inch on each side. Yes, draw my line, and then I'm going to do that on this side. 1 inch on each side. I wasn't on the inch lines. That's why you have to double check. Okay, here I only have one stitch line, one cross stitch to line up. So I'm going to line up with this edge here. I'm going to line up with this edge that I know straight and the one cross stitch that sticks out the furthest. There we go. Cut that. Okay, now that that's all cut out, we need to work on our backing fabric. Oops, I forgot to cut that side. Let's cut that side. Otherwise, it's going to look really weird. Okay, all cut. That's our pillow topper. Love it. It's going to be gorgeous. Now we just need to do the backing fabric. So, backing fabric. Again, I put interfacing on the back of my pieces, and I have pre-cut them and put a little clip at the top just so I know which way is the top, because I want it to be the same height as my pillow, or the width of my pillow, height of my pillow. So 7.5 inches. And then for the width, I went about 3/4 of an inch for my measurement. And I have 2 pieces that are the same size. Now I say about 3/4 of an inch. I'm not any more precise than that. 3/4 of the way across approximately always works out really well for me. So I just do height by 3/4 of an inch. And like I said, I put a clip on the top of mine because mine actually measures 7.5 inches by 7 3/4. So I've got 2 pieces that look exactly the same, and they're going to overlap. Now, again, I put interfacing on them because it's very thin cotton. Keeping my top sides up there. The next thing that we want to do is turn these ends under. And we're going to do 1/4 of an inch, press the seam, fold it again, 1/4 of an inch, press the seam. Then we're going to go to our sewing machine and sew right along here. We're just going to do a nice little top stitch to hold that down in place, and we're going to press the whole thing. We're going to do that on both pieces, both inside pieces. And one other thing I wanted to mention, and that's what makes them overlap, the fact that they're a little bit bigger. One thing I wanted to mention is which way does your line go? Now on this one, this square pillow, I have it going horizontally. That I think looks best. But when you have a rectangular pillow like this one, the horizontal line would be weird, and you wouldn't be able to get the pillow in there very easily. So my line's going to go this way. So when I measured, I did 3/4 of an inch by the height. If it were a square pillow, I did the height by 3/4 of an inch. Same thing, but my line's going to be going a different direction, if that makes sense. I'll show you what it looks like when it's all put together, but something to keep in mind when you're doing a rectangular pillow. Let me go press these and sew them, and I will come back. Okay, I have sewn the edges on my two backing pieces of fabric. They're both the same size. I'm going to have the opening go this direction. If you're doing a square pillow, you may want them going this direction. But we're going to do right sides together. This is my 7-inch side with my opening. I'm going to pin that in place, and then I'm going to put the other one right over there. It's going to overlap, oops, raw edges together. There we go. We want the stitched piece on the inside, raw edges together. We're going to clip that all the way around. We're almost done. We'll clip this all the way around. We'll go to the sewing machine one more time, and then we will sew our 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around and see what we have. Okay, I'm going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew all the way around. I will be back. We'll be able to turn this inside out and see what we've got. Put it on our pillow form. Okay, we're all sewn together around all 4 edges. You can see my overlap on the back here where my little pocket's going to be. I went ahead and clipped my corners, but you may want to turn it inside out and try it on your pillow before you clip the corners. So we're going to go ahead and turn this inside out. And when I'm doing this, I like to handle the backing fabric and not the cross stitch piece. Don't want to get my hands all over the cross stitch piece and risk getting it dirty or soiled in any way. You can use a point turner if it helps to punch out those corners a little bit. And then we're going to just slip our pillow form in there and see what we've got. Again, try not to touch your cross stitch piece too much. Okay, there we go. Point that out a little bit more. Okay, now we're just going to put our pillow inside. Just put it in one side. Stuff it all the way in there. Bring the bottom half of your opening up and get the second half of the pillow in. Go. Gonna have to play with it a little bit sometimes to get it in there just right. Kind of flatten it out. You can see that even without a seam allowance on my somewhat fluffy pillow, it fits just right. So adding a seam allowance would have made it too big. And you sometimes have to work with this a little bit to get the corners in there. This corner's not quite in, so let's get our tool in there and poke that in a little more. There we go. Okay, that's all there is to it. That's how you make it. I think that turned out really well. I'm really pleased with the way the pillow turned out. I love this little envelope opening in the back. Something that I neglected to mention is why I didn't leave an extra seam allowance. I cut my front fabric and the backing fabrics to measure exactly the size of the pillow. My pillow form was 7.5 inches by 10.5 inches, and I cut the front and the back to measure exactly that much. I did not leave any room for seam allowance. Normally you would add an extra 1/2 inch maybe for seam allowance all around. When doing a pillow like this, I find that it's best not to have the extra seam allowance. You want your pillow to fit in snugly and puff up a little bit. If you add that seam allowance, it just seems to always not fit quite right. You have baggy corners. Now, if you're not sure, you can always include the seam allowance, and then if it seems too loose, you can go back and sew a second seam. But leaving it out seems to work really well for me. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know down below. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and I will see you again soon.